6 a.m. Time to ride. It's Saturday morning, 6 a.m. What a great way to start the weekend. Let's go. All right, we're going to take a look at the North Loop here. There's a number of Wisconsin dual sport riders that I had talked to on the Facebook page that were interested in riding here at Crawford Hills, and this was kind of an impromptu ride, so apologize for not reaching out, but I figured there might be a handful of folks that'd be interested in getting up at Dark 30 and riding, but probably not so many that I'd make the call at 9 p.m. and say, hey, you wanna go ride? So the North Loop, when you get to the parking lot, you head over the bridge over the Crawford Creek, and the North Loop is by far the most popular or most burned in trail. The trail itself is wider than the South Loop or McKenna Loop, and it's all through the forest, so it's really beautiful. Pretty flowy. It's certainly the flowiest, and you do have to watch out for some tree roots. They can be kind of tenacious. If you're running motocross tires or even a 90-10 dual sport, I've been out here with Tusky Sports and such, and it's fine. If you're running more of a 50-50, some of the sand's gonna maybe give you a little bit of trouble, and some of the tree roots too. They can be slippery, but as long as you're running a manageable pace, you'll be fine. Yeah, so give yourself maybe an hour or so, and if you're just trying to do a nice slow trail ride, maybe an hour and a half. It's a beautiful trail. It does kind of wind back past itself, but you have to be pretty observant to see where that is. I mean, there's places where it's, the trail winds back probably within, 50 feet of itself, and you can't even tell. So, yeah, we're going to finish this loop. We're about a third of the way in, and gorgeous day, beautiful trails. It's awesome in the woods. It's supposed to be super hot today for Wisconsin, but it's only like 60 degrees right now, so it's just fantastic. All right, we're about 3/4 of the way through the North Loop, and just a couple things to mention. If you don't like sand, you should learn to like it a little bit. The North Loop does have some pretty loose sandy areas. I would say 70-80% of it is hard pack with some organics, but some of it is pretty loose. There's also some trenches that you need to kind of be careful, both uphill and downhill. There's also, and I'm not by any of them, I'm just kind of giving you an idea of the trail. I don't have a action cam with me, so another thing to think about on this trail is, or be cognizant of, are some of the erosion areas downstream of some roots. There's a few drop-offs on this trail, and if you haven't ridden it before, be cautious of the first one. When you get to the first one, you either need to be really careful or committed. It drops off enough that if you're not paying attention and you just kind of roll over it, and if you're not on your pegs or you're on the front brakes, you could endo. If you're on the pegs, just a tiny bit of throttle and you can kind of jump over it. There's 4 or 5 of those here, so but it's really only the first one that is the big challenge. All the other ones you can go as slow as you want and walk over them. So my current bike is a 06 KTM 525, and it's really nice on this stuff. It's used to ride a DRZ 400, which I really liked. It was a great dual sport. This bike's a little more tailored to off-road. It's lighter. but it's not quite as comfortable as the DRZ. It's got a lot more power. Suspension certainly better. It suits my style since I ride mostly off-road. But the on-road sections are, you know, this bike's kind of set up. You take the road if you have to. You know, if you're gonna do a tour with it, wouldn't be my first choice. But on these trails, absolutely love it. All right, we finished the North Loop, and there's a couple ways to get to the South Loop. When I get back to the parking lot, if I'm gonna do a couple more loops, I'd like to top off. It's only about 35 miles total, but just in case I want to run another half a loop or whatever. So I usually stop at the parking lot. There's two ways to get here. You can take the ATV Trail East. It's just a gravel and sand road, kind of like what I'm parked on here. When you get to the highway, you get to Highway 54 and you cross it, it's about a mile and a half, 2 miles from the parking lot. When you come in here, you'll see this, and you can catch a single track here. This loop ends right here. So it does start and end at the same spot. It is a loop. But we're on dual sports, right? So my preference, rather than just taking a sandy road, and depending on the time of day, might be a lot of dust from UTVs and such, just take Highway 54, about 2 miles. It's on your right. And you got to kind of know where it is because it's not marked. But anyway, here's the South Loop. We'll hit this. You know, right here, it's woods, but it varies. It goes to kind of open field areas. And this one's a little sandier, I think, than the North Loop. The single track is tighter. It's also flatter. There's not as much vertical relief. The North Loop is really pretty that way. There's some nice uphills and downhills. There's a few here. There's a few trenches here to kind of be careful with. You know, it's always best practice to keep your toes tight to the cases anyway, but don't hang your feet out, especially in the trenches. You'll catch a rut. This area too on the South Loop, you gotta be a little careful in the open areas. Once upon a time, I think this was all woods, but it was harvested off. This is county forest, and so they manage the forest. And the open areas have some stumps that are like in the grass right next to the single track. So if you're gonna just rip, you got to be real careful. You could have a really bad day if you're not paying attention. So I tend to ride the South Loop a little more conservatively. I kind of have to also. Like I said, it's sandy, it's narrow. I'm a okay rider, never raced, just like riding motorcycles, single track in the woods, beautiful stuff. Yeah, so let's go. So the south half of the South Loop, or the first half of the South Loop, these are one-way trails. If you rode out here 20 years ago, it is filled in a lot more. The trees and stuff are coming back. But you got to admit, you can't beat a morning ride. I've been out here for an hour and a half. Sun's still low. Trails are awesome. You can see there's some deer and turkeys and squirrels and hawks and grouse and stuff. But yeah, and the south half of the South Loop, or the first half of the South Loop, is also a lot different than the second half. The second half really, those woods haven't been touched in a long time, and so it just has a different feel. And with the roads and trails that are around here, you know, you can skip this first half if you want to avoid some of the loose sand and stuff. But for the most part, it's really awesome. And I'll show you in a minute where you can split. You can run this whole loop, or you know, you can run the first half, you can run the last half, you can run the first half and then hit McKenna. And there's places, if you run into a sandy ATV trail, you can turn left basically and head back to Highway 54. So there's a bunch of options here on the South Loop, this first half of the South Loop. The thing to look for, and where you really want to make a decision, is where you get to a larger ATV UTV trail. And you'll know it. Everything is kind of 2-track that crosses this thing until you get to the main trail. And then you got to make a decision. If you want to finish the South Loop, or if you want to divert and go up to McKenna Road, take the road back, or you can go do McKenna Loop, which is off of McKenna Road. Ton of options. So if you want to do half a loop, you can do that. Full loop, multiple different loops. Yeah, the sky's the limit. You can decide what you want to do on the trail. So we're going to saddle up and keep going. All right, we're 5 miles into the South Loop, and here we're at the main trail. Fortunately, it is fairly well marked. You know, when you get here, you can see you've got it signed. So you can decide which way to go. This trail intersects with McKenna Road about 150 yards up. If you want to head back to 54, you hang a left at McKenna, back to 54, and hang another left, head west on 54 to get back to the parking lot. So alternatively, if you wanted to skip the first half of the South Loop, you could just take the road, Highway 54 to McKenna, take McKenna to this, 150 yards, hop on the second half of the South Loop. I like the second half better. The first half's a little more challenging, a little more sand. A few spots are a little tighter. The second half's a little flowier. But it's all good out here. And at this time of the day, there's still nobody out and about, which is pretty cool. So we're a couple miles in on the McKenna Loop. And I think McKenna is the tightest of the three. Has the fewest whooped out sections, probably because it's a slower trail, but it has more tree roots to deal with than any of the other two loops. I typically run about 18 PSI to avoid pinch flats. You know, if you're riding slow, it's no big deal. And you got to be a little careful on these roots. But McKenna's kind of fun because it is definitely the road less traveled. There are a few places here where the grasses and brush are almost growing over the trail. So if you like the road less traveled, this is it. It's awesome. You just got to deal with a little bit of this. We're about 25 miles into our ride on the McKenna Loop. It's about halfway. You know, it's if you're off the trail at all where I'm standing, it's kind of hard to tell if there's a trail there, but there is. Again, you got to be kind of careful. You know, when this is harvested out, there are some stumps right next to the trail, so you got to be careful. But when I pulled over here, beautiful spot. There was a bunch of turkeys right where the camera's pointing now. This is pretty cool. and McKenna does vary greatly. It is not what I would call a flowy trail. Generally, there's a few flowy spots. It's pretty tight, but it's perfect for, you know, a trail ride. If you're trying to race, well, that's not why I'm here, right? I'm here to ride some trails on a street legal bike. And it really doesn't get much better than this. Beautiful day. Gotta love it. I'm normally not a huge fan of kind of a clear cut. You know, there's a lot of slash laying around. Kind of looks apocalyptic, but this particular area is really freaking cool. It's just, you know, I don't know how many years ago this was harvested out, a couple of years ago, because this used to be kind of through the woods. But what's cool is you've got the hills as kind of a backdrop, along with all the kind of the dead tree, the new growth. You've got the ATV, UTV, whatever trail kind of runs alongside this. Once we get down into this area, there's some new trail that's cut, and it is TI tight. It is very, very tight. Can't flow through that fast. It is awesome. Back into the woods, very cool. Yeah, so we're gonna enjoy this section, enjoy the views, because they are just beautiful. Had some sandhills take off flying here a second ago. With these trees, initially it kind of looked like the turkey vultures in that old Bugs Bunny cartoon. All right, let's get back on the trail. Well, we're wrapping up our ride for the day. We've got, we'll have just about 42 miles in when we're done. What a great way to spend a summer morning in Wisconsin. If you have not tried the Crawford Hills trails, you know, go online to the Jackson County website, get yourself a OHM sticker. Come on out, enjoy the trails. I've been riding these for just about 25 years. And, you know, for the most part, I think people are pretty sensible when they're riding. You know, if you're out here, especially if there are some wet spots from time to time, you know, just take it easy through those and try to keep the trail for the next several generations of riders too. Yeah, great time. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and maybe I'll see you on the trail sometime. Take it easy. Yeah, it was an awesome ride. Loaded up, heading home. It's 9:15. People were still making coffee in the campground. Trails were quiet. What a day. Absolutely love it. All right. Catch everybody on the flip side.